What is going on, guys? It is Wrestlelamia here, back with another video. Now, if you haven't caught our recent news this morning, Paul Heyman has been fired as Executive Director for Raw's creative department, but what does this now mean for the Red brand? Join us now as Wrestlelamia looks at the news concerning this and why Raw is doomed. I think we're exaggerating. You may think differently at the end of our video. But before we go into that, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for daily wrestling videos. Paul Heyman fired as Raw Executive Director. Now, in a surprise move, the WWE has released Paul Heyman as Executive Director of Raw's creative department. As WWE reported last night, in an effort to streamline our creative writing process for television, we have consolidated both teams for Raw and SmackDown into one group led by Bruce Pritchard. Paul Heyman will concentrate on his role as an in-ring performer. Does this mean he now looks like this? Now, what are the reasons behind Paul Heyman's firing? Naturally, everyone wanted to know why Heyman was ousted as Executive Director, and according to Paul Davis of WrestlingNews.co, a WWE source I spoke with told me that Heyman did not quit, and this was a decision made by Vince McMahon after expressing frustration with the Raw ratings. Another source told me that McMahon is more involved with Raw than SmackDown, and that made Heyman's job much harder as he had to try and push his ideas while trying to keep McMahon happy. Also, according to Fightful Select, others indicating they could see the writing on the wall of late. It should be noted that nobody we've talked to said that they knew of the change before WWE announced it on Twitter. Wrestling insider WrestleVotes also tweeted on the situation saying, regarding the creative change, sources indicates that Raw has been a mess lately. At times recently the show has changed up to the point of air. While the blame isn't solely on Heyman, he is the only one taking the fall here. "It couldn't continue like this" was an exact quote I got. While Twitter users question why WrestleVotes used the word lately, as Raw's ratings had been sinking for a while now, Ringside News also reported the ratings for Raw haven't been good. That third hour drags the entire 3-hour average down, but they've struggled to get above 2 million viewers for any hour in recent weeks. The ultimate reason, of course, is the ratings. As long as the ratings continue to drop, Vince McMahon needs a scapegoat so he can tell the USA Network and WWE shareholders that he's done something to fix the problem. Just like he did fixing the problem when he fired 2 co-presidents, to which stock then immediately plummeted. However, Paul Heyman's firing from the Raw brand leads to a troubling future. Heyman has been working on the Red brand since last summer. According to behind-the-scenes reports, Heyman has championed the careers of talent such as Ricochet, Cedric Alexander and Humberto Carrillo, striving to see them established as new stars. Although all 3 men received pushes for a time, including a brief US Championship run for Ricochet, they were constantly knocked back down the card, with rumour having it Vince McMahon didn't see anything in them. Heyman's most recent project, Apollo Crews, recently won his first championship, the US Championship, 4 years after debuting on the main roster. Some would say that's a hell of a long time, but then they look at Sami Zayn. With Heyman out, don't expect to see pushes for any of these wrestlers, and likely for a number of younger talent who have had spots on Raw such as Buddy Murphy, Austin Theory, Angel Garza and even Apollo Crews. It would not be a surprise to see McMahon stop their push and go back to his traditional approach of pushing older talent and hot-shotting programming by adding his golden boy Brock Lesnar. Now, according to WrestlingNews.co, it was also noted by Meltzer that there is a running joke backstage, and that was that Heyman built SmackDown nearly 2 decades ago around the SmackDown 6, and now he was building Raw around the SmackDown catering crew. WrestlingNews.co noted that this is a reference to names like Andrade, Zelina Vega, Buddy Murphy, Aleister Black and Apollo Crews, who were on SmackDown and were not getting pushed high on the card, and oftentimes will be brought to television only to sit in catering. Things almost get worse as now we know that McMahon may be back in charge. McMahon has been taking a little more of a hands-on approach on Raw rather than SmackDown, and he reportedly felt frustrated because he believed that the new talent, with the exception of a couple of them, were not getting over. The problem is, without a crowd, it's hard to know who's getting over and who's not. So it's kinda clear that McMahon is making hasty moves. He's not giving those wrestlers a chance. Who knows, when the crowd may come back, they may be over as hell. Now, to try and counter the problems of McMahon, Heyman was trying to change the face of WWE. WWE has a major problem in that it pushes the same number of stars in the company, and even though Heyman is good friends with Brock Lesnar, he is the one wrestler who epitomizes the problem of burying talent and new stars. As if you're not convinced, please see the burial of both Kofi Kingston and Ricochet. But to counteract this, Heyman actually wanted new faces on the Raw brand, and new faces in WWE. As we just mentioned, these involved the aforementioned group of superstars pushing mid-carders to the main event. Now, one of the wrestlers that Heyman had a vision for early on in his career was Drew McIntyre. Drew returned in 2018, but nothing ever happened until 2020, and at least now he's sitting high at the top, but that's thanks in part to Paul Heyman, who was trying to push Drew to the moon and wanted Drew to be booked as the super cool babyface star. As Meltzer recently noted, McIntyre had been booked with the idea of creating a super cool babyface star of the company. It was impossible to know if it would click without crowd reactions, but ratings didn't show life in recent weeks after McIntyre had overachieved in some segments in the build to WrestleMania and prior to the pandemic. Now, unlike Vince McMahon, Heyman knew the importance of creating new stars and putting those stars at the very top. The days of John Cena etc. are almost gone, and it was time to create a new era, and Heyman looked ahead. He also had plans for another superstar that has been severely underpushed, but now those plans might have been cancelled. Now, Paul Heyman's dismissal not only affects wrestlers who are deemed Paul Heyman guys backstage, but storylines that he has pitched that are still yet to air or are in the process of airing. One being the ongoing storyline between the Monday Night Messiah Seth Rollins and Rey Mysterio, with this being, well, a little bit of a minor spoiler alert, a segue to bring in Rey's son Dominic in as an official competitor on the Red brand, as his father has recently teased retirement. Now, according to the Wrestling Observer, Dave Meltzer noted that Paul Heyman was the driving force to involve Dominic in the storyline. The Seth Rollins Monday Night Messiah gimmick seemed boring, but was building to a program with Rey Mysterio and son Dominic that in theory had a destination. Now, without Heyman, it's possible that the storyline might change drastically and not involve Dominic further, perhaps even his official wrestling debut. Now, like we mentioned before, there was a superstar that Paul Heyman also wanted to push, and that was the almighty Bobby Lashley, that for whatever reason since his return to WWE, he's been put into awful storylines and remained in the mid-card until now. Now, there were plans of Heyman wanting to give Lashley a title run, hence why he'd been paired with MVP. Now, unfortunately with Heyman's dismissal, these plans may have been scrapped. But why do we feel that Raw is actually doomed? Now, Raw and SmackDown's ratings continue to drop, and while part of the drop can be attributed to the current health crisis, both shows had their ratings going down even before then. While Fox has renewed SmackDown for a second season on their network, they can't be thrilled with the ratings. As for Raw, it's likely the USA Network had been grumbling about the continued rating drops, including more than 1 week where Raw scored the second lowest rating in the show's history. And what does Heyman's removal mean for Raw besides the end of pushes for younger talent? It means Vince McMahon will continue to push his tired vision for Raw, as Bruce Pritchard is unlikely to do anything different than what he's doing on SmackDown. In fact, WrestlingNews.co's Paul Davis is reporting that Bruce Pritchard on SmackDown is said to be more in line with what McMahon wants. The evidence of this is the Jeff Hardy angle. It was reported on Wednesday by Sportskeeda that Friday Night SmackDown will include a controversial segment that is basically a rehash of something they did in 2006 with Shawn Michaels. What they are doing with Hardy is more in line with what McMahon wants, while Heyman has been pushing to get more younger talent moved up the card. As we often note, Vince McMahon is the person with the final say on anything that makes it to air. Regardless of whether Paul Heyman, Eric Bischoff or Bruce Pritchard's involvement, McMahon will only put things on television that meet his vision of the WWE. While Pritchard seems to know what McMahon wants, the problem is that the product being put out is not what the fans want. Otherwise, how to explain the ever-decreasing ratings every week? Raw's ratings drop can be blamed to a lesser extent on the overall splintering of ratings for all television, thanks to the proliferation of new channels and streaming services, but the drop is not consistent with what other shows are experiencing. Simply put, a good number of fans are tired with McMahon's future for professional wrestling, and as long as he is the final say, things will not change. They will only get worse, and while Raw may always be around in one form or another, perhaps on the WWE Network, its existence on a weekly show on a major cable network appears doomed unless drastic changes are made, and the key to this decision is either removing Vince McMahon from creative or allowing others to make decisions without his vetoes. Since the last seems unlikely, the first is the only workable option, but one unlikely to happen. But there you have it guys, our look at why Raw is doomed now that Paul Heyman is out. What do you think about this incredible change of circumstances? Be sure to leave your comments down below, subscribe if you haven't already, follow us on Instagram and Twitter, and I'll see you next time with some more wrestling content.